My wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, but my sister Pam turned it into a nightmare. At 30 years old, she had always been the golden child in our family, and she couldn't stand the idea of not being the center of attention even for a single day. When I announced my engagement, Pam was in the middle of a messy divorce, and she decided that my joy was an insult to her pain. She convinced our parents and several family members not to attend my wedding, claiming it was inappropriate for me to get married while she was going through such a difficult time. But that wasn't enough for her. Pam, in her relentless selfishness, took it a step further. She started spreading vicious lies about me, twisting the truth into something unrecognizable. She told everyone that I had been secretly trying to sabotage her marriage, that I had manipulated her ex-husband into leaving her because I was jealous of her. Can you believe that? Me, jealous of her crumbling marriage? It was absurd, but people believed her. She painted me as this heartless villain who cared more about my wedding than her suffering. The worst part? She didn't just stop at lies. She weaponized her pain, using it to turn our family against me. She cried to anyone who would listen, claiming I was the reason her life was falling apart. And it worked. One by one, family members started declining my wedding invitations. Some even blocked me on social media as if I were some kind of monster. The betrayal cut deep. I couldn't believe that the people I had grown up with, the people I thought loved me, could so easily turn their backs on me because of Pam's manipulative stories. My parents, who had always favored her, sided with her without hesitation. They told me I should postpone my wedding to spare her feelings, as if my happiness didn't matter at all. When I refused, they made it clear where their loyalties lay. They didn't come to my wedding, and neither did most of our family. The day that was supposed to be about love and celebration became a stark reminder of how little I meant to them. Pam didn't just ruin my wedding, she shattered my trust in my own family. And the worst part, she didn't even have the decency to feel guilty about it. To her, it was just another way to make sure she stayed in the spotlight, no matter who she had to hurt in the process. 3 years. That's how long it had been since I last spoke to my parents or Pam. 3 years of silence, of bitterness, of trying to move on from the betrayal that had tainted what should have been the happiest day of my life. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and mine came in the form of a positive pregnancy test. When my husband and I announced on social media that we were expecting, I never imagined it would reopen old wounds. Yet, there they were, my parents and Pam, crawling out of the woodwork like vultures circling fresh prey. After years of radio silence, they suddenly wanted to mend things. But their timing was anything but coincidental. Pam, now 33, had been struggling with infertility for years. Despite multiple failed IVF cycles, she refused to consider surrogacy or adoption. She was obsessed with the idea of having a biological child, and my pregnancy seemed to ignite a twisted sense of hope in her. My parents, ever her enablers, saw an opportunity to play happy family again. They reached out with a proposal so absurd it felt like a bad joke. They wanted Pam to share motherhood of my unborn child. Yes, you read that right. They suggested that my baby could have 2 mothers, as if Pam's involvement would somehow benefit me. They claimed it would be a win-win. I'd get extra help, and Pam would finally have the chance to experience motherhood. But I saw right through their charade. This wasn't about me or my child. It was about Pam. It was always about Pam. My parents couldn't stand to see their precious daughter suffer, so they were willing to sacrifice my boundaries, my autonomy, and even my child's well-being to ease her pain. The audacity of it all left me speechless. Did they really think I would forget how they abandoned me on my wedding day? Did they honestly believe I would hand over my baby to the woman who had spent years tearing me down? Their so-called olive branch was nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to manipulate me into fixing their broken family dynamic. And the worst part? They had the nerve to act offended when I refused. They accused me of being selfish, of not understanding Pam's struggles. But what about my struggles? What about the years of hurt they had caused me? Their sudden interest in my life wasn't about love or reconciliation. It was about control. and I wasn't about to let them use my child as a band-aid for their dysfunction. When my parents and Pam proposed their outrageous idea of sharing motherhood, I felt like I was living in some twisted soap opera. Did they really think I would just roll over and let them rewrite the narrative of my life again? I had spent years rebuilding myself after they shattered my trust, and now they wanted to waltz back in as if nothing had happened. But this time, I wasn't the naive younger sister who would quietly accept their excuses. This time, I fought back. I told them exactly what I thought of their generous offer. I called it what it was, a selfish, manipulative ploy to ease Pam's guilt and my parents' guilt over favoring her for decades. I accused them of only caring about me now because I had something they wanted, my unborn child. And then, in a moment of raw, unfiltered anger, I said the one thing I knew would cut deeper than anything else. I told Pam she didn't deserve to be a mother. I said her toxic behavior, her lies, and her relentless need to control everyone around her made her unfit to raise a child. I even threw her sabotage of my wedding back in her face, reminding her how she had turned our family against me with her vicious rumors. The words poured out of me like a dam breaking, years of pent-up frustration and pain finally finding a voice. But of course, they didn't take it well. How could they? Pam immediately played the victim, crying to our parents about how cruel I was being. My parents, ever her defenders, turned on me with a fury I hadn't seen since my wedding. They accused me of being heartless, of kicking Pam while she was down. They demanded I apologize, as if I were the one who had wronged her. But I stood my ground. I told them I owed them nothing, not an apology, not my forgiveness, and certainly not my child. The argument escalated, voices rising, accusations flying, until it felt like the room was spinning. And then, in a final act of defiance, I told them to stay out of my life for good. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking, my heart racing. But even as the adrenaline faded, I didn't regret what I'd said. For the first time in years, I felt like I had taken back control. They could play the victim all they wanted, but I knew the truth. They had brought this on themselves. And if they couldn't handle the consequences of their actions, that was their problem, not mine. The truth about Pam's divorce was like a bomb waiting to explode, and when it finally did, it shattered any remaining illusions I had about her. For years, she had painted herself as the victim, the heartbroken wife whose husband had abandoned her, because he didn't want children. She had spun this elaborate tale of betrayal, casting herself as the martyr and me as the villain who had supposedly manipulated her ex-husband into leaving her. But the reality? It was all a lie. A lie so big it made my head spin. I found out the truth by chance, during an awkward encounter with Pam's ex-husband at a restaurant. He approached my husband and me, congratulating us on our wedding and apologizing for not attending. When he mentioned Pam's predicament as the reason, I couldn't help but press for details. What he revealed was nothing short of shocking. The real reason for their divorce wasn't just about differing views on having children. It was about trust, or rather the complete lack of it. Pam had secretly stopped taking her birth control pills without telling him, hoping to force him into fatherhood. She had admitted this to him during one of their arguments, laughing it off as if it were some harmless joke. But to him, it was a betrayal of the highest order. He had trusted her, and she had manipulated him in the most intimate way possible. When he confronted her, she tried to downplay it, but the damage was done. Their marriage was over, and Pam's desperate attempt to control the narrative had only made things worse. She had blamed me for their split, telling everyone I had poisoned her husband against her. But the truth was, she had no one to blame but herself. Hearing this, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, disbelief, and a strange sense of vindication. All those years of being painted as the villain, of having my wedding ruined and my reputation tarnished, and it was all because Pam couldn't face the consequences of her own actions. She had lied to our family, to our friends, to anyone who would listen, just to save face. And the worst part? She had gotten away with it for so long. But now the truth was out, and I had the power to expose her. The question was, would I? Part of me wanted to shout it from the rooftops, to finally clear my name. But another part of me just wanted to move on, to leave the drama behind and focus on my growing family. Either way, one thing was clear. Pam's carefully constructed facade was crumbling and there was no going back. The final straw came when my parents and Pam decided to take their smear campaign public. For weeks, they had been posting vague but pointed comments on social media, painting me as the villain who had ruined Pam's life and mocked her infertility. They didn't mention me by name, but everyone knew who they were talking about. The audacity of it all was staggering. After everything they had done, after the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal, they had the nerve to play the victim. I had tried to stay silent, to focus on my pregnancy and my own happiness, but their relentless attacks pushed me to my breaking point. I couldn't let them rewrite history again. I couldn't let them destroy my reputation while they hid behind their carefully crafted lies. So I did the one thing I had been hesitant to do. I exposed the truth. I reached out to Pam's ex-husband, who confirmed everything he had told me about their divorce. With his permission, I posted the full story on social media. I laid it all out, how Pam had secretly stopped taking her birth control to manipulate him into having a child, how she had blamed me for their split to cover up her own deceit, and how my parents had enabled her toxic behavior for years. The response was explosive. Family members who had once turned their backs on me were suddenly flooding my inbox, asking if it was true. Some even had the nerve to demand I take the post down, as if I were the one causing trouble. But for the first time, the tide was turning in my favor. Many relatives began to criticize Pam and my parents, calling out their hypocrisy and lies. It was a small victory, but it felt like justice. Of course, not everyone apologized. Most of them just wanted to distance themselves from the drama, as if they hadn't played a part in it. My parents and Pam, meanwhile, went radio silent. They didn't defend themselves, didn't try to explain. They just disappeared like thieves caught in the act. And while part of me wanted to revel in their downfall, another part of me felt hollow. This wasn't how I had wanted things to go. I hadn't wanted to air our dirty laundry for the world to see. But they had left me no choice. They had pushed me to this point, and now they were reaping what they had sown. As I sat there scrolling through the comments and messages, I realized something. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their approval. All I needed was the truth. And finally, I had it. The final act of defiance wasn't theirs, it was mine. After years of swallowing their lies, absorbing their cruelty, and bending to their warped sense of loyalty, I finally severed the last thread binding me to Pam and my parents. When they crawled back, offering hollow apologies conditional on my silence, demanding I erase the truth I'd exposed, I laughed. Not the kind of laugh that comes from joy, but the bitter, ragged kind that claws its way out of a throat raw from screaming. They thought they could bargain with me, as if my child, my marriage, my peace were commodities to be traded. But I was done playing their games. I deleted the social media posts not for them, but for myself. The toxic chapters of my life didn't deserve space in the story I was building with my husband and our unborn child. Let the world gossip. Let Pam seethe. Let my parents spin new lies to salvage their tarnished image. None of it mattered anymore. Blocking their numbers felt like cutting a noose from my neck. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was clean. For the first time, I could breathe without the weight of their expectations, their blame, their endless need to punish me for existing. Of course, they didn't go quietly. Pam launched a final, desperate campaign to rally the family against me, screeching about betrayal and cruelty to anyone still listening. My parents, ever her puppeteers, painted themselves as martyrs, clutching their pearls over my heartlessness. But their theatrics fell flat. The relatives who'd once turned on me now watched their meltdown with weary disdain. Even those who refused to apologize knew the truth Pam's web of lies had unraveled, and there was no stitching it back together. My husband held me the night I officially blocked them, his hands steady on my shaking shoulders. "They don't get to hurt you anymore," he said, and for once I believed it. My in-laws, my friends, my family now showered me with the love I'd spent a lifetime chasing from people who never deserved it. The baby growing inside me became my anchor, a reminder that blood means nothing compared to the bonds we choose. Do I regret what I said? The sharp words, the refusal to forgive? Not for a second. Pam's infertility isn't karma, it's a tragedy. But her inability to conceive doesn't erase the poison she's poured into my life since childhood. My parents' tears don't absolve them of choosing her destruction over my happiness, again and again. Some wounds don't heal. They scar. And scars remind us not to touch the fire twice. So here I am, a mother-to-be, a wife, a woman who clawed her way out of the rubble they left behind. Pam and my parents are ghosts now faded, irrelevant, their voices drowned out by the laughter in my home, the kicks in my belly, the future I've built without them. Let them haunt each other. I've closed the door on their darkness, and I'll never look back. Our family was built on a rotten foundation, my parents' blind, suffocating favoritism for Pam. From childhood, they treated her fragility as sacred, her whims as gospel, while my needs were dismissed as inconveniences. Pam wasn't just the golden child, she was a deity in our household, and I was the heretic who dared to exist outside her shadow. That toxic dynamic didn't just shape us. It broke us. Pam learned she could weaponize tears to erase accountability. I learned that love was conditional, earned only through silence and sacrifice. Their bias didn't just poison our sisterhood, it bred a monster. Pam's sabotage of my wedding wasn't some impulsive act of jealousy. It was the culmination of decades of coddling, of whispers that she deserved more, better first. When she lied about me ruining her marriage, my parents didn't question it. Why would they? To them, Pam's pain was always more valid than my truth. They let her burn my happiness to ash if it meant keeping her warm. And when her infertility became a new cross to bear, they expected me to hand over my child as tribute, a consolation prize for their failed golden girl. But hatred, when nurtured like a second heartbeat, has a way of corroding everything. Their lies festered, their betrayal fanned the flames, until the family they built on Pam's pedestal crumbled. The reckoning wasn't pretty. Relatives who'd once applauded Pam's drama now recoiled from her unraveling lies. My parents, exposed as enablers, became pariahs in their own narrative. And me? I became the scorched earth they never planned for a daughter who refused to play martyr anymore. Cutting them off wasn't revenge. It was survival. My child will never know the suffocating weight of Grandma's comparisons or Aunt Pam's venomous love. They'll never sit at a holiday table where affection is doled out like rations to the worthiest victim. I've built a new family now, one where love isn't a battlefield. My husband's laughter, my friend's loyalty, the steady kick of my baby's feet, these are my compass, my armor. Let Pam and my parents rot in the graveyard of their choices. I've buried their legacy, and from its ashes, I'm growing something they'll never understand. Peace.